Hi everybody. Once again, let's do a Q&A video. We've not done one for I don't know how long it was since I did the last one. I don't know why I even started that sentence. But I've really been enjoying doing these question and answer videos. It's been great hearing all of your thoughts and ideas, and throwing topics my way, questions, and I love discussing it with all of you. It's I guess I prefer more than anything interacting with people on YouTube. Sometimes I've put out videos that have had thousands of views on certain channels and not many comments. And really, I think the comments, when people are actually engaging with you, I'd much rather have a video that has like 30 views but it has quite a few comments, and then we can all sort of talk with one another. I much prefer that. So, as always, if you get any other questions or topics you want to discuss, just put them down below and I will get to them eventually. I'm just slowly going through all the questions that everyone has already asked. Alright, let's do a few tonight then. I'm drinking, I know it's midweek, and this isn't good for someone who is trying to lose a little bit of weight, but I've had a bad week. That's my excuse. Anyway, okay. Zenarat asks, I went all William Shatner there. Okay. Zenarat asks, who is your favourite horror author? I'd have to say mine was Edgar Allan Poe. That's what Zenarat says. Thank you very much for your question. Brilliant question. I would agree with you. Edgar Allan Poe is not only my favourite horror author, but probably my favourite author of all time. I haven't read much Poe in the last couple of years, but since I was a kid, I think I told this story in one of the other Q&A videos. My dad would tell me ghost stories and horror stories, and some of them he would make up, some of them would be based on mythology or ghostly accounts around Glasgow. But he would also like give me the abridged versions of loads of Edgar Allan Poe classics. So from a very young age, even before I'd read the stories, I was acutely aware of Edgar Allan Poe and the stories that he wrote. Although at that time, my dad would always tell me that the stories were real. So Edgar Allan Poe, I love his short stories. I love his poetry. Obviously, with regards to his poetry, The Raven is his masterpiece. That's what he considered to be his greatest poem. But I do love A Dream Within a Dream. I actually wrote a song. It's going to sound really lame. I actually wrote a song and used the lyrics from A Dream Within a Dream. I might upload that at some point. I love El Dorado as well. Not the crappy British television soap that get cancelled, but the poem. And I think he's a really underrated poet. I think people tend to analyse his short stories a lot more than they analyse his poetry, but I think his poetry is really good. I love his short stories. I don't think anyone can really rival Poe in terms of just such an abundantly interesting imagination, and in terms of coupling that with such a phenomenal writing style which is so descriptive. I mean, there are entire passages, you look at The Mask of the Red Death, it very much feels as if that story, and it's only about 5 pages long, isn't actually really about much, but it's so descriptive. It's dripping in just atmosphere because of the type of vibe that Poe would create through his language, that you just can't help but get drawn in to it. And he coupled that brilliant ability to write with a fantastic imagination. Some writers, I was talking about this on the forums. Go and check out the forums if you haven't checked them out. They're on areashifty1.com. I was talking about a book that I'd read, well, a novella that I'd read recently. It was called Who Goes There, which is the story that The Thing was based on. And it's really pretty poorly written, but it's got a great idea behind it and a great concept. So that's what keeps you reading. But the actual writing style to me was really haphazard, and that shows you how you get a lot of things which, and you get some that are the other way, that are really well written, really well written stories, but not really having much content. It's the old style and versus substance argument, and it's phenomenal when you get someone who has both the style and the substance, like Poe did. Some of my favourite stories: Cask of Amontillado, The Black Cat, Premature Burial, Pit and the Pendulum, um, Fall of the House of Usher, of course. Already mentioned Mask of the Red Death, The Gold Bug. I have a particular soft spot for the Dupin mysteries, Purloined Letter and Murders in the Rue Morgue, and the mystery of Mary Roget. Um, I love the fact that really it's like reading Sherlock Holmes before Sherlock Holmes. So anyway, um, that's my favourite author. I also love Stephen King. I think Stephen King is someone who will be rated as one of the great authors in another 50 years' time. Unfortunately, probably once he's passed away, he'll then be rated. I think it's scandalous how people rail on him as not a great author because of the genre that he writes in. The genre's got nothing to do with it, you know. Isaac Asimov was a fantastic writer. He wrote in science fiction, but it doesn't matter the genre. It's all about the imagination and the journey that the writer takes you on, and maybe helping you learn something along the way. And I think Stephen King's fantastic. Okay, so that's from Zenarat. Thank you very much for your questions. Great question. Making It Up Forever asks, what's your favourite Kolchak episode and why? Brilliant question. Again, I know I keep mentioning this. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, is probably my favourite television series of all time. It revolves around a newspaper reporter who is investigating a bunch of paranormal or weird goings on, and each week he would have to invariably chase down some sort of monster or creature as he tries to find out what's actually happening around normally deaths and things like that. The best episode though, that's hard. I mean, there weren't many episodes made. Certainly, I think the first movie, which was just called The Night Stalker, is definitely the best of the Kolchak, the sort of Kolchak franchise. I like The Night Strangler, but I really think The Night Stalker, the original movie, is phenomenal. And that's just because I think it's a realistic take on the vampire mythos. It's a fantastic vampire story. Okay, so in the television series, well, you see, here's the thing. I don't think you can really look past Horror in the Heights. Horror in the Heights is about this creature called the Rakshasa, which is from Indian mythology, and it's this sort of demonic creature that almost comes out from this hell-like dimension to scout out for some sort of evil force, to see whether the world is ready for evil to truly return to the world. And there are these people who are I don't want to ruin it, actually. I don't want to ruin it for you too much if you haven't seen it. But anyway, the Rakshasa gets its victims by appearing as someone that you would trust. And I think it's just the best made of all the episodes. It's got Phil Silvers in it, doing a great role. Most people would know him as Sergeant Bilko. It's got a fantastic atmosphere. You have all of these back alleyways of that sort of these sort of Chicago neighborhoods as well, and they sort of entwine that into the sort of Jewish community, the elderly Jewish community, as well, and it's just got a great atmosphere to it, the entire series. And I love the old, let's say the old sort of senior citizens in that community, like playing cards and all that, but there's something lurking nearby in this old warehouse where they're trying to all get away from their wives, and I love all of that. I think it just had everything, and you also learnt something about Kolchak as well, which you never really do because the Kolchak episodes are really empty in terms of developing Kolchak's character. But you do find out who he actually trusts because he sees a Rakshas at some point, and it takes the image of someone that he trusts. I always wished it was Vincenzo though. I wanted it to be Vincenzo. Other episodes I love. Now here's an episode that really gets criticised an awful lot. There's an episode, the werewolf. Normally the episodes are named just after the creature a lot of the time, the monster, and that's why it sort of started getting made fun of at the time as a monster of the week type show, and it really was that. But there's one with the werewolf where people tear that episode apart. It's one of my favourites because it takes place on a cruise ship. The werewolf effects are awful. I mean, there's no doubt, but that's like going right back to not even as good as the Wolfman, the Universal picture. I mean, you're talking about like I was a teenage werewolf effects, and but the atmosphere again on the ship, and I'm fascinated by cruise ships and ships in general. Like I love the sea. I love to go sailing. So just the whole atmosphere and the interaction between Kolchak and all the passengers is just a really unique, great setting for that sort of thing. The vampire is a great episode as well. Quite liked the Ripper. Really liked the makeup effects and the zombie. One of them's really terrifying, which is Demon Lace, I think it's called. The makeup effects for the creature on that are really frightening. Anyway, so there are loads of great episodes. I think the thing with the show is that you have to take it with a grain of salt, but really it's just entirely brilliantly enjoyable. And I really, if anyone has a bootleg out there of the two other Kolchak movies that appeared after the television series, please let me know. As far as I'm aware, you can't buy them on DVD, and they're actually each of the films. I remember watching one of them, and that was my introduction to Kolchak when I was a kid. But both films are basically 2 episodes each, edited together into one story. But Darren McGavin, who plays Kolchak, re-recorded dialogue and recorded a voiceover for it, so it is technically got some new stuff in there that I haven't seen since I was a kid. So. If any of you have those, I think one's called Demon Laced and the Mummy, and I can't remember what the other one's called, but definitely let me know. But fantastic stuff. Great question, making it up forever. 23 Penguin, 32. 23 Penguins, 32. Brady, I can always rely on you to ask some questions. Okay, this is good. Who is your favourite scriptwriter? Doesn't have to be one film or favourite film. That's a good one. I have to say that I'm a big fan of directors who write their own scripts. Just simply because I feel like the film is then truly theirs. So I'd have to cop out and say, people like Orson Welles, John Carpenter. John Carpenter's written some fantastic scripts. In fact, some of his films have been made into some of his scripts have been made into films that he didn't direct. The Eyes of Laura Mars, was that her name? Can't remember. Films like that have been made from Carpenter scripts. So they would they would be my favourite. I know it's a bit of a cop out, but I think they would be. Okay, so let's see. Right, on to the next one. I was just reading there. I'm trying to see which ones are questions and which ones are just statements or observations. Okay, Christy O'Connell, 311. I completely agree with your take on The Thing from Another World. I'm glad you do, because it's a phenomenal film. Okay, so what is your opinion on horror flicks that are inspired by video games? Another great topic. I think anyone that's watched most films that have been based on video game properties would know that they are invariably bad. Normally, it's because the people who are directing them either don't get what the video game is about, so they're not really interested in adapting it in that way, so that the fans of the video game would actually enjoy it, or they just don't know how to bring cinematic conventions to the story from the video games. I think most are pretty terrible. I actually think the first Resident Evil film is not bad. It's watchable, which is about the best thing you can say about most video games films. I think the later ones are pretty poor, but I think the first one is watchable enough. I enjoyed it enough when it first came out. I know a lot of fans hated it, but it genuinely did not bother me. It amazes me though that the franchises went for that long now. I mean, what are we on now? The sixth film or something like that. I gave up after the third one, I think. And then obviously you've got Uwe Boll, who's the famous German director who has adapted numerous video game properties, but really his films are awful. I like Uwe Boll as a guy in terms of he doesn't take shit from anyone, and he's just like, I'll do whatever I want, and I kind of, I do respect that. This is a guy, so you probably find this on YouTube. Uwe Boll, spelled UWE, is a director who challenged critics of his films to a boxing match, and he fought like four of them in a boxing ring. That was quite funny, and he also like tore Michael Bay apart, which at the end of the day he's probably got more right to do that because he's working in nowhere near the same budget that Michael Bay is. But the thing is, that gets me with Uwe Boll is that he does things like, for example, Dungeon Siege that he adapted, and he gets like Jason Statham, John Rhys Davies, Ray Liotta, Ron Perlman. It's unbelievable the actors that he gets to work in his films, and I just don't understand it. It must just be money. It must. We also have here's one that I actually enjoyed for what it was Doom, and anyone who knows me knows I'm a massive Doom fan. I'm about to put my gaming credentials and geekiness out there for all the world to know about. I'm part of a gaming a Doom community called Z Damon. I still play it. I love it. I played in the British Capture the Flag team for years for Doom, and at one point I was the captain of it. That's how geeky I am, and I love the game. And most gamers who play Doom hate the film. I liked it not because it was Doom, but because it reminded me of crap 80s action science fiction films that you would get out in VHS. I used to go to the video shop when I was a kid every Friday night with my friend, and we would be drawn right into shit, to like, you would see a video and it would be like, it would have guys with big badass looking guns and aliens in the front, and you'd be like, I'm having some of that, because I mean, Aliens, the film, is great, Predator's great, so this film, which is called Alien Predators, must be amazing. And it just kind of reminded me of having that sort of hammy 80s feel to it, but it just felt like something that would come from that era. I think as well the fact that it's got a very sort of constrained location, which a lot of these films from the 80s do because their budget is so small. It reminded me of that. I kind of got a kick out of the 3D, the first person scenes where it went all Doom, but the problem with it was it got a little bit like a Ghost Train. It didn't. I think they could have done it a little bit better. There's a bit where a zombie jumps up and goes, ha ha, and you're just like, why would a zombie do that? And I think as well, if they should have stuck to the design of Doom games. Instead, what they did is they tried to cash it in with regards to Doom 3. So all of the enemies are the enemies from Doom 3, and it just Doom 3, as much as I enjoyed the game, nothing compared to Doom and Doom 2. So normally video games make bad films, but it's normally because either directors or studios, producers don't get or understand the property that they're developing, and they don't understand what makes it great, and they tinker with it too much, and it just ends up being a complete and utter mess. And we have to remember as well, film and video games, they're different mediums. So just like there are things that work in a book that will not work in a film, there are things that will work in video games that don't work in cinema, and vice versa. So sometimes there are some things which shouldn't be adapted just because they are purely part of that medium, and they wouldn't work cinematically, or they wouldn't work within, the opposite is often true. Most, with a few exceptions, most adaptations of films into video games are also crap, and that's why, because sometimes it just doesn't translate. So anyway, Christy O'Connell 311, thank you very much, brilliant question. Let's see if we got any left. No, I think that's us. I think that's us for tonight. Thank you for all the questions. Great stuff. I don't know where I'm going with this now. I really don't. You all asked some really great questions, and if there are any more that you have or topics you want to discuss, leave them down below and I will get back to them. And I'm going to shake up the channel a little bit. I'll probably do a video about this probably tomorrow, about what's going to happen in the channel in the future, because things are going to change around here. Bad impression of a Western. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye for now. Your ghostly accounts around Glasgow, but he would also like give me the abridged versions of loads of Edgar Allan Poe classics. So from a very young age, even before I'd read the stories, I was acutely aware of Edgar Allan Poe and the stories that he wrote. Although at that time, my dad would always tell me that the stories were real, So, Edgar Allan Poe, I love his short stories, I love his poetry. Obviously, with regards to his poetry, The Raven is his masterpiece. That's what he considered to be his greatest poem. But I do love A Dream Within a Dream. I actually wrote a song. It's going to sound really lame. I actually wrote a song and used the lyrics from A Dream Within a Dream. I might upload that at some point. I love El Dorado as well. Not the crappy British television soap that get cancelled, but the poem. And I think he's a really underrated poet. I think people tend to analyse his short stories a lot more than they analyse his poetry, but I think his poetry is really good. I love his short stories. I don't think anyone can really rival Poe in terms of just such an abundantly interesting imagination, and in terms, I'd much rather have a video that has like 30 views but it has quite a few comments, and then we can all sort of talk with one another. I much prefer that. So as always, if you've got any other questions or topics you want to discuss, just put them down below and I will get to them eventually. I'm just slowly going through all the questions that everyone has already asked. Alright, let's do a few tonight then. I'm drinking, I know it's midweek, and this isn't good for someone who is trying to lose a little bit of weight, but I've had a bad week. That's my excuse. Anyway, okay. Zenarat asks, I went all William Shatner there. Okay. Zenarat asks, who is your favourite horror author? I'd have to say mine was Edgar Allan Poe. That's what Zenarat says. Thank you very much for your question. Brilliant question. I would agree with you. Edgar Allan Poe is not only my favourite horror author, but probably my favourite author of all time. I haven't read much Poe in the last couple of years, um, but since I was a kid, I think I told this story in one of the other Q&A videos. My dad would tell me ghost stories and horror stories, and some of them he would make up, some of them would be based on mythology. Hi everybody, once again let's do a Q&A video. We've not done one for, I don't know how long it was since I did the last one. I don't know why I even started that sentence. But I've really been enjoying doing these question and answer videos. It's been great hearing all of your thoughts and ideas, and throwing topics my way, questions, and I love discussing it with all of you. It's, I guess I prefer more than anything interacting with people on YouTube. Sometimes I've put out videos that have had thousands of views on certain channels and not many comments. And really, I think the comments, when people are actually engaging with you,